I overheard my parents secretly using my money for Christmas gifts, then banning me from the house. So I threw a $2 million villa party, with one rule: no parents allowed. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Rhea Knox. I'm 27 years old, and I've always been the quiet, responsible daughter. I worked hard, saved carefully, and built a good life for myself. Even after moving out, I still helped my parents, Marlon and Vera Knox, whenever they needed it. Bills, repairs, small emergencies, I paid without complaining. I thought that's what a good daughter does. One night, I came by their house to drop off groceries. I heard them talking in the living room and stopped when I heard my name. My father was laughing, saying they used my savings to buy Christmas gifts for the whole family. My mother said I wouldn't mind because I always bounce back. Then she added that maybe it was better if I didn't come home for Christmas anyway, since I was too focused on myself. I felt sick. That money was meant for my future. When I confronted them, they didn't apologize. They called me selfish and said if I was going to question them, I wasn't welcome for Christmas. Just like that, I was banned. I went home and cried, but something changed in me. I realized they didn't respect me. They only respected what I gave them. So I made a choice. I hosted Christmas at my coastal villa. I invited friends and people who had always treated me kindly. The only rule was simple: no parents. That night was warm and peaceful. For the first time, I felt free. I didn't need revenge. I just needed my life back. Growing up, I learned very early that I was the one who had to step up. When I got my first job, my parents praised me for being mature and dependable. At first, it was small things. A late utility payment. A car repair that couldn't wait. I didn't mind. Helping felt natural, almost expected. As the years passed and my income grew, so did their needs. If an appliance broke, I paid for it. When an unexpected medical bill showed up, I handled it. Family vacations that were supposed to be shared expenses somehow landed mostly on me. Each time, my parents promised it was only for now. They said once things got better, I wouldn't have to worry anymore. I believed them. I told myself families support each other. I skipped personal wants, delayed plans, and ignored the quiet stress building inside me. When friends talked about saving for homes or traveling, I smiled and said maybe later. I felt proud being the one they could rely on. What I didn't notice was how normal it became for them to ask without hesitation. There was no discussion, just expectations. If I ever paused, they reminded me how much they had done for me growing up. That guilt worked every time. I transferred money and moved on. They never called it help. They called it responsibility. And I wore that title like armor, even when it got heavy. I trusted their words that this phase would end. I trusted that they still saw me as their daughter, not a solution to their problems. Looking back, I realize I was never asked how I felt. No one checked if I was tired or worried. I was simply the one who handled things. And because I never said no, they never imagined I would. There was one place where I thought I had drawn a clear line. Years earlier, I opened a separate account with a single purpose in mind. It wasn't for fun or comfort. It was for stability. Someday, I wanted a place of my own, something permanent that no one could take from me. I added to it slowly and carefully, treating it like a promise to myself. When my parents found out about it, they insisted on being listed just in case. They said it was smart planning, something families did to protect each other. They swore it would only be used if something truly serious happened. I hesitated, but their calm reassurance made me feel foolish for doubting them. That account became untouchable in my mind. I never spoke about it. I never checked it with worry. I believed it was safe because it was built on trust, not just numbers. In my heart, it was still mine. I assumed they understood what it meant to me. It represented years of discipline, skipped comforts, and long hours. It wasn't extra money lying around. It was the future I was working toward, brick by brick. The idea that anyone else would feel entitled to it never crossed my thoughts. I thought they respected that boundary, even if they crossed others. I thought they knew some things were sacred. I couldn't imagine them opening that account and seeing it as a shared pool. I couldn't imagine them justifying it as something they deserved. In my mind, it was clear, access didn't mean ownership. Permission didn't mean freedom to decide. That belief stayed strong right. That night, I arrived later than planned. The house lights were on, but the place was quiet. I set my keys down softly, not wanting to wake anyone. As I walked past the living room, I heard voices coming from the kitchen. I was about to announce myself when my father's tone stopped me cold. He sounded pleased, almost proud. He was talking about the holidays, about how everything was finally coming together. My mother responded with excitement, mentioning decorations, gifts, and how good everything would look when the relatives arrived. There was laughter between them, relaxed and careless. Then I heard my name. My father joked about how easy it was to handle things this year. He mentioned covering all the expenses and said it was a relief not having to worry. My mother chuckled and said I never push back anyway. She said I always agree in the end, so why stress about it? They talked like I wasn't a person, just a guarantee. My father said it felt good to finally host something impressive, to not feel smaller than everyone else. He laughed again and said I wouldn't make a fuss. According to him, I never did. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding. They spoke freely, confidently, as if they had every right. There was no concern about asking, no hesitation about limits. Just comfort in knowing they could reach and take without consequences. What hurt most wasn't the spending. It was the tone. The ease. The way my trust had become a joke between them. I felt invisible, reduced to a quiet solution they didn't even bother to think. I backed away without making a sound. In that moment, something cracked open inside me. I realized I wasn't overhearing a mistake. I was overhearing the truth. I stayed where I was, still listening, even though every part of me wanted to leave. My mother's voice softened, but not in a kind way. She said maybe it would be easier if I wasn't around during the holidays. According to her, I had grown distant, too self-sufficient, too focused on my own life. She said I didn't really need family gatherings anymore. My chest tightened. I had never missed a holiday. I had rearranged work, cancelled plans, and driven long hours just to be present. Hearing her speak as if my absence wouldn't matter felt like being erased. My father didn't argue. Instead, he took it further. He said maybe space would do me good. He talked about how people my age forget where they come from and how a little distance could remind me to be thankful. His words were calm, almost instructional, like he was explaining a lesson that needed to be taught. They spoke about excluding me as if it were a parenting strategy, not a punishment. There was no sadness in their voices, no doubt. Just certainty that removing me would somehow fix something they believed was wrong with me. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. I had given them time, effort, and loyalty. Now I was being discussed like a problem that needed correction. Not once did they mention how I might feel. Not once did they question whether this was fair. The realization sank deep and heavy. This wasn't about a misunderstanding or a bad decision. They truly believed they were justified. In their minds, I had stepped out of line simply by existing beyond their control. I quietly picked up my bag and left without a word. The cold air outside hit my face, but it didn't numb the ache. What hurt most was understanding that they didn't just take from me. They were ready to push me away and call it a lesson. The next morning, I returned with a steady voice and a racing heart. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I simply asked for an explanation. I wanted to hear it directly, not through walls and whispers. I believed honesty might still exist between us. My calm seemed to irritate them. My father's face tightened first. He asked why I was questioning him at all. My mother crossed her arms and said my tone was disrespectful. The moment I mentioned the account, everything shifted. Their reaction wasn't regret. It was rage. They said I had become cold, obsessed with keeping what I earned. My father raised his voice and claimed I cared more about numbers than blood. My mother said I had let success turn me into someone who measured love instead of giving it freely. I stood there, stunned. Helping had never been optional in their eyes. It was expected, and anything less felt like betrayal to them. My mother accused me of hiding resources while they struggled. She said I enjoyed having security while they worried. I tried to explain that planning ahead didn't mean I loved them less. That wanting something for myself didn't erase everything I had already given. They wouldn't listen. Every word I spoke was twisted into proof of my flaws. My father said I had forgotten where I came from. He said real family doesn't keep score. Then he laughed and asked when I became so greedy. That word hit hard. Greedy. After everything. The conversation spiraled fast. Voices rose. Blame filled the room. I realized they weren't interested in understanding. They wanted surrender. Agreement. Silence. When I finally stopped talking, the room felt hollow. I wasn't exhausted from arguing. I was exhausted from realizing nothing I said could change how they saw me. That moment broke something permanent. I walked away knowing I hadn't just lost a discussion. I had lost the illusion that love alone could protect me. The argument ended without resolution, but the tension didn't fade. It thickened, heavy and final. My mother straightened her posture, her voice suddenly flat, almost rehearsed. She said that if I was going to behave this way, I shouldn't come back for the holidays. There was no anger left in her tone, just dismissal. My father stood beside her and didn't object. His silence felt louder than shouting. It confirmed everything. This wasn't a threat meant to scare me into backing down. It was a decision already made. I asked if they were serious. My mother didn't hesitate. She said they didn't need conflict during Christmas. If my presence brought tension, then it was better I stayed away. She framed it like a reasonable boundary, as if I were the problem disrupting peace. I felt my throat tighten. I had walked in hoping for understanding. I was walking out erased from a place I once called home. No one tried to stop me. No one softened their words. There was no moment of doubt or second thought. I picked up my coat with trembling hands. My legs felt weak, but I forced myself to stand straight. I refused to let them see me fall apart in front of them. The door felt heavier than it ever had before. When I stepped outside, the air hit me hard. My chest ached, and my breath came uneven. I sat in my car for a long time without turning the key, staring at the house through blurred vision. That building held every memory of comfort I thought I had. I wasn't just excluded from a celebration. I was pushed out of belonging. The rejection settled slowly, painfully. I had always believed family meant permanence. That night proved how conditional it truly was. I drove away in silence, my hands shaking on the wheel. I didn't know where I was going emotionally, only that I couldn't go back. Something precious had been taken from me, and I finally understood it wasn't money. It was the idea that I was ever truly safe with them. I spent the next few days in quiet isolation. There were no calls, no messages, no attempts to soften what had happened. The silence forced me to sit with my thoughts instead of running from them. Without the noise of arguments, everything became painfully clear. This had never been about finances. If it were, there would have been discussion, compromise, or even apology. What they wanted was obedience. Agreement without question. The moment I spoke up, I stopped fitting the role they had assigned me. I replayed years of interactions in my mind. The praise only came when I complied. The warmth disappeared whenever I hesitated. Support was conditional, offered only as long as I remained useful. I wasn't valued for who I was becoming, only for what I provided. That realization hurt more than the rejection itself. It stripped away excuses I had made for them. I had mistaken dependence for closeness and obligation for love. Once I removed emotion from the picture, the pattern stood exposed. I saw how often my needs were dismissed. How my achievements were treated as opportunities rather than milestones. How my independence was encouraged only when it benefited them. Something shifted quietly inside me. Not anger, not revenge. It was resolve. A firm, grounded understanding that I could no longer bend myself to keep peace that was never mutual. I didn't cry anymore. The sadness settled into something steadier. I stopped asking what I could have done differently and started asking why I had tolerated so much for so long. For the first time, I chose clarity over hope. I accepted that I could not change how they saw me. But I could change how much access they had to my life. That realization didn't make me cold. It made me protected. And once that line was drawn internally, there was no going back. I sat in my apartment, staring out at the darkened streets, thinking about what the holidays would feel like alone. The thought made my chest tighten, but then I remembered the villa I had bought years ago, a quiet retreat by the coast that I hardly visited. It wasn't just a property, it was a place of freedom, untouched and mine. An idea began to form. Instead of sitting in silence, I could fill the space with warmth, laughter, and people who actually valued me. I started imagining the rooms filled with friends who had never judged me for what I earned or expected me to solve their problems. People who showed up for me, not for what I could give them. I made a list carefully, thinking about those who had been steady in my life, people whose presence felt genuine. I wanted everyone to feel welcome, included, and safe, the way I had rarely felt at home. The villa would be more than a location, it would be a statement. A declaration that I could create joy on my terms, without anyone dictating my boundaries. The planning was deliberate. I chose decorations that felt personal, food that felt comforting, music that reminded me of laughter instead of tension. It had to be perfect, not for show, but for the feeling of connection I had missed for so long. For the first time in years, I felt anticipation rather than dread. The villa wasn't just an escape, it was a reclaiming of something I had almost lost, control over my own life and experiences. Hosting this gathering wasn't about proving anything to anyone, it was about choosing the people and energy I wanted to surround myself with. That night, alone in the villa, I realized that for the first time, Christmas could feel like it belonged to me. I could decide who mattered, who stayed, and who didn't. I spent hours drafting messages to the people I wanted around me. Every name was considered carefully, those who had offered kindness, those who had been present without asking for anything in return. I didn't want anyone who might carry the weight of old expectations or drama. This was meant to feel safe, warm, and genuine. When it came time to set the rule, I hesitated. The words felt heavy, almost cruel, no parents. No exceptions. My finger hovered over the send button longer than I expected. For a moment, guilt clawed at me. Family was supposed to be part of the holidays. But deep down, I knew this was about protecting the space I was creating, not punishing anyone. Finally, I hit send. The relief was immediate, like a weight lifting from my shoulders. Messages went quietly into inboxes. No grand announcements. No need for drama. Just invitations to share a day filled with gratitude, laughter, and belonging. I thought about how strange it felt to enforce a boundary so firm, something I had never dared to do before. I had spent my whole life giving, accommodating, and bending to keep peace. This time, I wasn't bending. I wasn't negotiating. I wasn't compromising. The idea that my parents might find out lingered at the back of my mind, but it didn't stop me. Their reaction no longer held the power it once did. This wasn't about revenge, it was about choice. As confirmations trickled in, a quiet excitement replaced my anxiety. People genuinely wanted to be there. People who saw me, who valued me. I felt something rare, peace. A simple sense that I was doing something right for myself for the first time in years. The rule, firm and clear, changed everything. It wasn't just a line on a page, it was a declaration that I had a say in my life, and that for once, the night finally arrived, and the villa buzzed with life. People arrived with smiles and arms full of homemade dishes, blankets, and candles. The air smelled of roasting food and pine, a scent that felt comforting and alive. For the first time in years, there was no tension, no unspoken expectations. Laughter filled the rooms as stories were shared, glasses clinked, and music hummed softly in the background. I watched friends talk, joke, and move freely, and a warmth spread through me I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Every corner of the villa seemed to hum with genuine connection. No one asked for anything. No one expected me to solve problems, cover bills, or mediate disputes. Instead, people asked how I was, what I enjoyed, and listened when I spoke. I felt valued, not for what I could give, but simply for existing, for who I was beyond family obligations and money. I wandered through the rooms, quietly smiling, noticing the little details. Someone had brought my favorite dessert, another had hung twinkling lights in a pattern only I would recognize. I realized that this space, created entirely on my terms, radiated warmth because of the people I chose to share it with. It hit me how rare this feeling was, being fully seen, fully appreciated, without strings attached. For so long, attention had been conditional, tied to what I provided or allowed. Here, there was none of that. I sat back, glass in hand, and breathed deeply. The villa, the people, the night, it all belonged to me. Not in a selfish way, but in the way that felt like freedom. I was finally being acknowledged, not for wealth or obligation, but simply for being myself. And it was the most peaceful Christmas I had ever known. A few days later, I heard whispers that my parents had caught wind of the villa gathering. Apparently, a cousin mentioned it casually during a family dinner, and the news traveled fast. I didn't seek their reaction, but I knew it was coming. When they finally confronted me, their voices were sharp and trembling with anger. My mother accused me of trying to embarrass them, of flaunting my wealth and making them look small in front of others. My father added that it was a deliberate betrayal, a humiliation he couldn't forgive. I felt a strange mix of disbelief and clarity. I had expected anger, maybe disappointment, but the intensity stunned me. They used the same harsh words I had once heard from them directed at me, twisting them back as though I had committed some unforgivable offense. They claimed my actions were selfish, that I had no right to celebrate without them, that I had intentionally excluded them to teach a lesson. Their faces were red, their hands shaking slightly. They looked as if the world had turned upside down, and I was to blame. I listened without interruption. For the first time, I didn't try to justify myself or argue. Their outrage no longer scared me. I realized their fury was more about losing control than about Christmas or even me. Their sense of authority had been challenged, and they couldn't accept it. Standing there, I finally understood that nothing I did would ever satisfy them. Their anger said more about them than it did about me. I felt calm, detached, and strangely liberated. They had voiced their fury, but it no longer held power over my choices, my space, or my life. In that moment, I knew the villa, the laughter, and the warmth were mine to keep. No argument or accusation could take it away. When their anger finally subsided, I remained silent. I didn't apologize. I didn't defend myself. I simply stood firm, feeling a strength I hadn't known I possessed. The guilt they tried to press onto me no longer landed. Their judgment bounced off, leaving only clarity. I reviewed everything I had worked for, the accounts, the villa, the careful plans for my life. For the first time, it all felt entirely mine. Not shared, not borrowed, not controlled by anyone else. I tightened boundaries I had once hesitated to enforce. No one could dictate how I spent my time, my money, or my energy again. It wasn't about punishment or proving a point. I didn't need them to see their mistake. I didn't need validation or approval. What mattered was reclaiming my sense of self, my freedom to live without fear or expectation. Every decision from that moment forward belonged solely to me. I thought about the villa, the laughter, the warmth of people who appreciated me. The joy of that night wasn't revenge, it was evidence of what life could feel like when lived on my own terms. That realization settled deep in my chest, steadier than anger or resentment ever could. I felt peace, not pride, satisfaction, not triumph. I let go of the need to punish or shame. The real victory wasn't in their discomfort, it was in my liberation. I could breathe, laugh, and exist without compromise. For the first time, I understood that freedom wasn't flashy or loud. It wasn't in a grand gesture or a dramatic statement. It was quiet, steady, and mine. I had lost nothing that mattered. That night, I finally felt whole. I was free, and nothing, not betrayal, not anger, not past pain, could take that away. Living fully, on my own terms, had become the only reckoning I needed. Hey besties! Thanks for sticking with me through this intense story. Imagine realizing the people you trusted most see you only as a resource, not family. It hurts, but it can also ignite a quiet strength inside you. Choosing yourself, reclaiming your life, and surrounding yourself with those who truly care is freedom. If this story resonated, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more. See you next one.